You got to get some background music, Nick. I suggest watch.
About to go on, Javi.
And then I'm going to put some curse words on it. I'm ready, Sam.
Good afternoon, everyone who's joining us, and welcome to ARC's Fireside Chat. Today we'll be talking about the case for restorative justice and how healing dialogue can transform our justice system. Before we get started, as usual, I would like to give some simple instructions for our audience. If you go to the bottom of your computer screen, you'll find a ribbon. Underneath, there's one icon that says chat and one icon that says Q&A. If you would like to ask questions or put comments in the chat to communicate directly with our guest, please feel free to do so. Again, if you look at the icon that says chat and the icon that says Q&A, you can ask questions live throughout the show. And if we're able to, if we have time, we'll definitely answer those questions. I'd also like to make our audience really aware that this is a difficult subject matter. It's gonna be heavy, it's deep, it has a lot to do with loss and pain and suffering, but also what healing actually looks like. And so I'd like to introduce some truly amazing people that I've been blessed to be able to get to know. First, I'd like to introduce, or would like to introduce Javier Stauring, who's the Executive Director and founder of Healing Dialogues in Action, and then also Itzel and Maggie. So first, Javier, would you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, and it's such an honor to be here with you, Sam. Thank you for the invitation. So Javier Stauring, my quick background, I worked over 25 years as a chaplain in juvenile halls and detention centers. I oversaw the detention ministry in all the juvenile halls and probation camps in LA, Ventura, and Santa Barbara counties. I worked for the Archdiocese and started a Families of the Incarcerated ministry there, and also oversaw our survivors ministry. And about 4 years ago, a little under 4 years ago, I think, left that position and opened up Healing Dialogue in Action with the help of a lot of my friends and colleagues.
Thank you so much, Javi. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for the amazing work that you do to help healing in our communities. Maggie and Itzel, please introduce yourself, tell us your story, and talk about your podcast, please.
So we're sisters, and now I'm the oldest, but we used to have an older sister that passed away about 10 years, almost 10 years ago, alongside with her daughter that was just 2 weeks old. And just through that experience, we went on to some
healing circles.
Yes, and we had the pleasure to meet Javier in our journey, and then we ended up wanting to create a podcast where we can share and we can have people share also their journey, how they lost someone, and how their healing process is, or what part are they, or what helped them.
So thank you for joining us. This is a heavy topic. So a little about my experience. So as a teenager, I committed a violent act that murdered someone. And for me, to be able to do the work that I do, or to even be released, I had to first, one, understand the impact of the pain and suffering that I had caused, and also take full responsibility and be willing to be accountable for what I had done. At one point, I thought I would die in prison. And once I accepted the peace that was possible, I also understood that for me, being spiritual, I believe that if God had something else for me to do, it meant that I needed to give back in order to try to change how other people might impact their communities like I did. So that's part of the reason why I do the work that I do. Every day that I live and give back, I can't replace the life that I took, but what I'm able to do is help others not make those mistakes and help others to understand how important it is to help those that we've harmed to heal in some manner. So that was my journey. It took me 24 years inside and a lot of work. And one of the things that I did was actually speak to people who had lost loved ones in violent crime. And we'll talk more about that at the end of the show. But what I'd like to ask, Javier, what led you to actually exploring and engaging in restorative justice? And I'd like to also ask you and Maggie also, Itzel. So Javier, could you share, please?
Sure. So, I started volunteering at Juvenile Hall over 30 years ago, just because my mom volunteered there before I did, and she was bugging me, and I became curious enough to go into a juvenile hall and see what that was about, right? But when I got there, there was a nun who was a chaplain, and I volunteered through the Catholic program there, right? And I told Sister Janet, who was a chaplain, I said, I'm here, but I have nothing to connect with these kids, nothing to relate to. I said, I've never been a gang member, I've never been locked up, but I'm here. And to her credit, she said, well, keep coming, see what happens. And what I realize now in retrospect is that, on the contrary, I had a lot to connect with the young people there, right? So I had never been a gang member. I had never been locked up or had family members that were locked up, right? But I could relate with their stories of loss, right? My story is that my dad passed away when I was 9 years old, right? And at that time, we had just moved to Mexico. I was born here in the States. We had moved to Mexico. I've been in Mexico maybe a month or so, and my dad passes away. So I'm living in a foreign country. I don't feel, connected to anybody there. I talk funny. People see me different. And I didn't know one single kid that didn't have a father. So I automatically, I felt, like I felt I wasn't a part. And that turned into, okay, well, I have to prove that I am Mexican enough to hang out with my buddies, right? And get into trouble and just that fear, that fear of people knowing that I was fearful. More than anything, fear of showing that I was really scared growing up, right? And so when I heard the stories of loss from the kids, I could connect with them at that level, and because I wasn't religious, I didn't come in with any theology training or anything like that. I was fortunate to team up with people like Father Greg Boyle and Father Mike Kennedy, right? And through the guidance of elders like that, and just coming in with an open heart, I immediately connected with the young people there, so much so that it changed my career completely. I came from another field completely, and I think that this is what this work is all about. It's just about connections, and so here we are over 30 years later.
Thank you. Itzel and Maggie, what led you to exploring and engaging in restorative justice? And I ask you that from your perspective, which is so important, because the key, in my opinion, for our communities is to be able to become whole, for people inside prisons to actually find their way home, is restorative justice. And oftentimes it took me at least 15 to 17 years before I was ready to take those steps. Well, what made you begin to make this journey and actually explore restorative justice and start engaging in this manner?
So I want to say almost not immediately, but soon after our sister passed away, we met Father Mike Kennedy and Rita Chaides. And they connected us actually with Javier. And initially, it was just my parents that were going to these retreats and to these healing circles to try to, I don't know, find some, I don't want to say peace, but just to like calm their souls, I guess, because of the loss they had went through. And for us, I don't want to speak for my sister, but for us, for me, I felt like it was my parents' thing. So originally, it was like, oh, like it's just something my parents do to help them cope with the loss. It's their stuff. And then I want to say, what, 3 years after when the court process started, that's when I started getting more involved with healing dialogue and action. Javier would, first of all, he was very helpful through the court process. He was always there showing his support, as well as Mike Kennedy, Father Mike Kennedy and Rita Chavez and Elizabeth Calvin. But besides that, they started inviting us healing dialogue and action to share our story and give insight and our experience to other people and go to schools and universities and just share what we went through. Our experience was a little bit unique in the sense where that we forgave our offender. So we started sharing our story, and we realized soon that by sharing our story and by telling other people our experience, we were slowly starting to heal. So it was this beautiful realization where it was like letting it out and sharing your story to other people doesn't only help other people get an insight of restorative justice and make a change, but it also helps us because we were slowly starting to heal. We were slowly starting to cope with our sister's death. So even though it will always hurt and will always have hurt in our hearts, it's just finding this will to be able to just keep going.
Wow. How powerful, truly powerful.
And Maggie's been inside prisons. She sits in circles with people that were convicted of the same crime that you were convicted of, Sam, and shares their story with them. And Zen has sat in circles with the chief of victim services for CDCR, has shared at universities. And I mean, I've come to the realization that healing dialogue and action, our true calling is just to create platforms so that more people can listen, see people like Itzel, Magali, and yourself, Sam, right? That people that have gone through these horrible, painful, grueling experiences and somehow got to a point where they their healing journey became finding purpose to that pain and using that pain for a common good, using that pain without putting labels on anybody, but just seeing how can I help others who are suffering move forward, right? And when I say our calling, that healing dialogue and action is to create these platforms, I really do believe that that is the key for so many survivors that are out there that 20, 30 years later, you speak with them and they still express the pain as though the loss of their loved one happened yesterday. And just real quickly, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but the case of Magali and Itzel is so emblematic of a system that professes to look for justice, but that justice has nothing to do with helping the people that have been impacted by the crime get to a better place. And I see DAs rolling out survivors, of crimes that happened 20, 30 years later. And it feels so sad to see that the difference, right? The difference between Magali, Itzel, for example, and survivors that are still in so much pain. Like Itzel said, the pain will never go away. They'll always remember their sister, and there will be some pain there, but you carry it differently. And at the time that much like yourself, Sam, that at 15 years, however you were in there, and then started to think, okay, I need to use this experience differently. I need to turn this around. And you committed yourself right to that. Those journeys that so many of you take create unique gifts that most of us out here in the community don't have, because we're not going to commit 15 years to bettering myself and in the same way. And when you go through that process of figuring out, okay, how did I get to prison? What happened in my life that contributed towards these actions? And get in touch with the pain that you've caused others, and develop deep empathy. And then move out of that shame into finding purpose to the worst experience of your life. And committing yourself to a life of peace and nonviolence in one of the most dehumanizing, violent atmospheres that there are. And developing that commitment to make amends. That process is not, it does not exist out here in the free world, right? So recognizing that that Itzel, that Magali, you have the gifts that I want my kids to grow up with that, right? What are we gonna do when our lives get really, really tough? Are we going to stay in anger and think that somehow that anger is gonna go away by itself? Or can we find spaces like ARC, like Healing Dialogue in Action, like so many of you in prison have found on your own, to really reflect on how can I find other people where I can talk to that I can relate to, that know the pain that I'm experiencing because they've experienced so much pain, and can in some ways, hold my hand while I'm walking through this journey. And I think that is what restorative justice is about. There's no agendas. Itzel and Magali chose to forgive, and I admire them, and I see the incredible gift that is. But at Healing Dialogue in Action, we don't enter into relationship with anybody telling them that they need to heal or that this is the path or follow. We just accompany them on their own path with love, with validation. We see you, we hear you, right? And we connect them with people like Itzel and their mom, who's been working with me since the get-go, Juanita, she's the mother saint of the whole household. We connect them with people like that so that they see that, yes, they don't forget the pain, but they carry it differently. They live life with more joy. And that is restorative justice in a nutshell.
So I actually wanted to Maggie and Itzel, I'd like to ask you, so you said being able to share your experience and your loss helps heal. What part did being able to forgive the person that did this, like what role did that play in your healing, and why did you decide to forgive?
So my mom, the day after, I don't quite remember, but yeah, what I've known, the day after she actually decided to forgive, and she called our offender's family and welcomed them to the funeral. And she told them, I have nothing against you and I forgive you and all this. I was in the hospital at that moment, so I wasn't able to be in the funeral. But just hearing this from my mom kind of, inspired us. And then just knowing my sister, who she was, and what she would have wanted. And just, it was this, it's hard to explain what you feel when you choose to forgive, but that happened immediately within like a week of what had happened to us. And then after that, my mom started just joining these healing circles. She then invited me since I was older. I was, when my sister passed, I was 17. So, I mean, not so like a year, 2 years after, I had the age to go to prison and like go to different healing dialogues and just do all this stuff. So she invited me, and I just, like Itzel said, like I feel that being in these circles and just talking a little more just made it easy, and also like having people to understand and know what we've been through or just make an impact in other people's life. It just, it helps one. And then being able to forgive, I mean, we did forgive him, but it helped, forgiving him helped us. Then we let go of that anger and that resentment, and we were able to just move forward and, you know, move on.
Yeah, and I think the thing with forgiving someone, it's not that you just let it go and like, oh, it's okay now. For me, the way I see it is forgiving someone for the actions they did doesn't mean that you should be okay with the actual action. So just because I forgave him doesn't mean that I'm not still angry or hurt or sad about what happened, because at the end of the day, I did lose my sister. I'm just not holding on to that anger and that resentment. I'm not living the rest of my life hoping for the worst for him, because that just takes up my energy. And that brings a whole nother toll on you. And that's just more baggage you're willing to carry and you're choosing to carry. And we just decided very early on that we didn't want to do that. And that we already had enough with her death. We don't want to add more pain by holding this resentment that just wasn't necessary.
Powerful. Your mom and you two ladies are amazing.
Can I just ask Maggie to give a little context why she was in the hospital? Like, what happened there?
So I ended up having some fractures. I broke my cheekbones and just dislocated my jaw.
Tell them what happened. Like,
So our offender is actually was actually our oldest sister's boyfriend. Something happened, things led up to one thing, and so then he crashed his car into our house, and we were all in that room, at least my immediate family, my parents, my brother, my nephew, my niece, and my sisters were all in that room, and myself, so that when the car impacted, it took, well, my sister passed away instantly. My niece passed away within hours. And then I was taken to the hospital because I fractured my cheekbones, dislocated my jaw, and I just, I was in intensive care, I believe, for like 2 days because I had like a blood clog in my brain, and I just couldn't retain short-term memory. So I was there until, they were able to get rid of that. And then I was, a week later, I mean, I went through surgeries, and then like I was out within a week. But for that same reason, I was not able to go to my sister's funeral services at all.
I'm so sorry for what you had to endure and your loss, but the power that you exhibit by forgiving is truly transformational. I'm in awe of you. Just simply put, your mom has raised two amazing women, and I'm just in awe of you. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being able to lift the voices of people who have lost loved ones to violent crime. I could just finish the show and just keep saying thank you, and that'll be it, because I think you all are amazing. And Javier, the walk, just the journey walking with families who've lost loved ones. Like it's amazing work that you've done. I've seen it up close, known you for a while, and I've seen the transformations inside walls, and hoping that we can start bringing things like this to our communities in a broader setting, so that we don't have to have loss. We can find ways to heal before it goes this far. I wanted to ask you, Javier, I know there have been like many moving moments in the years that you've been doing this in Healing Dialogues and Action Circles. Can you recall one or two that were like really particularly powerful that just come to mind right now?
Yeah, you're right. You know, I have been blessed with having the opportunity to enter into a relationship with some of the most incredible people in the world, right? And I include you in that, Sam. People that have overcome so much and just become our examples, you know, of how we can build a better world in general, right? And well, I'll stay with the family. I'll say when I first met their mom, Juanita, we had a what do we call it? I guess we just called it the Healing Dialogues back then. Healing Dialogue Retreat, where we invited about 15 family members who had loved ones murdered and 15 family members who have loved ones serving life sentences in prison. And then we break up into smaller groups. So I was leading a small group with 3 moms who had a child murdered and 3 moms who had child serving life sentences. And Juanita shares her story, you know, and all the pain that the ripple effect that, you know, having her losing a daughter and granddaughter to a violent crime caused, you know, and as you might imagine, you know, the women are crying, and then the mom who is sitting next to her is actually, you know, her son. He's at Lancaster. It's her turn to share, and she says, you know, I feel like I can't even share because I'm going to cry, and I don't deserve to cry. And she says, Juanita, you deserve to cry because your daughter and granddaughter were killed, but my son killed another person. So I don't even feel like I deserve to cry. And Juanita gets up and goes over and hugs her. And she goes, of course you deserve to cry and you should cry. You lost a son too. And she says, and I want to do everything that I possibly can to help your son come home one day. Right? So that type of interaction, you're not going to get it at the best psychiatry office. You're not going to get it with the traditional therapist, which we need. We need 100%. I'm not you know, speaking of that in any negative way. We need more of that. But the type of connections that we're talking about that transform people, that heal people, many times come from tearing down these imaginary divides that the system has set up, right? That if you're a victim, you stand on that side of the courtroom. If you're the offender and their family on that side, and you never ever are going to cross that divide, right? And so what we try to do is create opportunities, and most of them are surrogates, where like the retreat that we had, you know, where we bring together parents that can connect through their pain, because when you hear stories like that, you no longer think about that person with the label, oh, that's the mother of the criminal, or that's the mother of the victim, right? You just connect on, wow, that I can understand that pain because my pain is so similar. And the differences are minor compared to that connection.
Thank you, Javier. I want to ask you one more question, then I want to come back to Itzel and Maggie. So what is victims awareness? Could you define that for our audience so people can better understand what it means when a person says, I've gone through a victims awareness class inside or I was in a seminar and this is what it helped me understand?
Yeah. So we're fortunate to soon be in 10 different prisons. And we offer victim awareness classes inside the prisons. Right now, we're doing it remotely and using videos and trying to connect with people the best we can, which is challenging because, as you might imagine, this work depends so much on being present and being in relationship with people, right? So when we're teaching victim awareness classes in prison and we are there, it is a journey that starts with inviting people to first better understand what were the factors that led to their behavior, right? So if it's with men or women inside prison, we're exploring, you know, all the different factors that contribute towards human behavior, right? And invariably, we always get guys that say, no, you're looking for excuses. I did the crime. I take responsibility. And we say, of course you did. This is not an excuse. What we're trying to figure out is what happened to cause that behavior so that you don't do it again, right? And for that, we need to figure out root causes. And so we do a little bit of that. And then we explore the ripple effect that their actions had on the community, right? So it's not just if it's a murder, and then that's the population that we focus on, are homicides. If it's a murder, it's not just the person who lost their life. There's a huge ripple effect, right? So we explore how that ripple effect has impacted entire communities and your own families and yourself. And we are very clear about, we recognize that you're suffering and that you caused a lot of suffering in the world, and that you made that you have brought a lot of pain to a lot of people. But that does not negate the fact that you're suffering too, right? And how can we focus on alleviating that suffering on everybody without putting labels on people, right? And so we have them get in touch with the pain that they've caused, because that is, you need to take responsibility for your actions to heal, right? And then we invite them to move out of shame and into using that new awareness of the harm that they caused to motivate them. And we say, and you can't wait till you get out. So you start by helping those around you. You start by creating a yard that is safe and that is something where the new you is okay with. You know, so it's more than anything, Sam, it's connecting people that have been disconnected their entire lives. You know, I've sat in circles with men that are 70 years old and say, this is the first program I've been to, and I've been locked down for 40 years, and this is the first time that I'm talking about this. And always, when we're talking about, you know, where do we think this came from? It always goes back to when I was 5 years old, when I was 10 years old, when I was 12 years old. And these are men in their 70s that had never shared any of that.
So personal experience, I remember when we went through the Victims Offenders Education Group, the first thing that we did was draw a timeline. And we wrote down all of the great memories we had. And then we had to write down all of the bad memories we had. And initially you block out a lot of the stuff that you went through. And then you can start, once you write down all of them, because it's a difficult task, because oftentimes it's stuff that you want to forget about that has transpired, right, when you were young. And then after you write those out, I remember being asked by our facilitator, how did that make you feel? And there were 10 of us in the group, very small group with a therapist. And I just remember not being able to answer the question because I had blocked it out. And this is normal. And the facilitator said, your homework tonight is to go back and think about how it made you feel and write about it. And it was a hard task, but it like literally digging that up, because you respond certain ways based on your experiences in life. But I remember that. I want to just answer a couple of questions that come in our chat box because it's a conversation. So one question was, are we part of the prison abolitionist movement, ARC? No, we're not part of it. We're not connected to a part of the prison abolitionist movement. We believe in reforming and making our system more just and more humane, and believing in healing and restorative justice. But we're to some extent, at least I'll say for me personally, having spent 24 years in prison, I believe personally that there are instances when we don't need as many prisons, but we do need prisons for people to be able to work on healing themselves so that they never commit the type of crimes that have been committed before. And I'll be the first to admit, going into prison at such a young age, I was so angry and mad at the world. If I had not been held accountable, I would not be where I'm sitting here today. I probably would have did something worse or ended up dead, one of the two, because I was on a collision course and I just didn't know why. So that, and then one of our viewers also wanted to ask, and I think you touched on this already, Javier, do you work with families of people who've committed offenses? So the answer to that is yes. Towards the end of the show, we will definitely be putting up for the podcast. We will also be putting up information for contacting and reaching out to Healing Dialogues in Action, so that we can expand this work both inside institutions and even into our communities. And the last question from our viewers was, do you work with people who have been charged with sex offenses? And so again, the answer to that is yes. Please reach out to Javier at the end of the show. We will have that contact information. I wanted to go back to Maggie and Itzel, two amazing human beings. Sorry, we talked about this. I have to get this censure fixed. But wanted to ask you, language is so important, so powerfully important. And I wanted to ask you, regarding language, what is the distinction between using victim of crime and survivor of crime? And is there a preferred language?
I think personally, and I can speak for both of us, we prefer survivor. Why? Do you want to explain why you prefer survivor?
So for me, and I know my sister didn't go through the funeral, but going through a funeral process, you have, and specifically my sister's, because it was just crazy packed. She was a very social person, so there was a lot of people there. So much that some people had to wait outside and take turns. So you have all these people coming up to you and telling you how much they feel sorry for you and how much, oh, things happen for a reason. Oh, don't worry, it'll get better. Oh, she's in a better place now. And even though, yes, these are lovely words, and I know they say it from the heart, trying to genuinely make us feel better, but all I hear is pity. So when you're over here calling me a victim of crime, you're just adding on to the pity. I don't need the label. That's just showing, for me at least, weakness. So for me, I'm a survivor because I went through this experience, but I'm still here and I'm still continuing with life and I'm still going to school and I'm still just continuing, you know? So for me, again, it's victim is just something where you just stop. You're that's it. That's what defines you. This occurrence is all that your story, and survivor is just so showing that you continue and you're fighting.
You choose to move on, not move on with your life, like saying, you know, your last one is in the past and that's it. No, but you choose to honor them and continue walking through your life, honoring your loved one and surviving this one step at a time, just surviving from this very traumatic experience. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. Losing someone, especially in very violent ways, is not easy, and it leaves you with some sort of trauma. So then calling ourselves survivors gives us that sense of, you know, we're still fighting and we're still going.
So for our audience that's listening, please remember that we empower people who've lost loved ones by calling them survivors, not victims. They're not victims. They're survivors. They're thriving, and they're bringing to our world for lack of the best way I can describe what you do is you're bringing more love and peace to our world than anyone else. I mean, the power that you bring and being able to survive and share your story is transformational in and of itself. So you are 100% survivors. Brooke in our chat box and the whole crew that's listening from ARC Healing Dialogues recognize you as survivors. Thank you. Javier, do you want to weigh in on the language piece, or did Itzel and Maggie cover it all?
I think they covered it, and both of them mentioned, you know, that it is a personal decision, you know, how they want to. We always use the word survival. We always think of them as survival.
Absolutely, and we'll make sure because we push language, and the importance of the use of that language, we will make sure that we're pushing that language to make sure that we're empowering people who have survived violent crimes. Javier, a question for other nonprofits or smaller nonprofits: how can they join together and bring healing and action and dialogues to our community members who are currently incarcerated and in the community? Like, how do we do this? How do we partner? I mean, we've partnered on some endeavors, but how do we do this with even more organizations in order to make our communities better, in order to spread this throughout the correction system, not just in California, but across the nation, so that our system becomes more humane, and people who've lost loved ones to violent crimes and have survived violent crimes are empowered and are able to heal. And how do we do that? How do we partner? How do we create better partnerships and larger partnerships?
Yeah. So, you know, we are in the process of rolling out and further evolving a what we call community healing model, which I think that this effort will connect so many of the pieces, right? Inside, outside, survivors. And what it's based on is the fact that right now, at a time where we need concrete change, right? It's a unique time in history, what's happening around, you know, the awareness about our broken systemic racist criminal justice system, right? Systemically racist justice system. So it's a unique time. People are looking for better solutions. We know that our system of justice doesn't work and we need changes, and we're all on that. But we need to prioritize people's healing journey as much as the concrete changes that we are bringing to our communities, right? And so this community healing model, at the center of it is recognizing and compensating the unique gifts that people like you, Sam, like Itzel and Magali have, like I was referring to, right? And anybody who's been doing this work, if that question came from nonprofits that go into prison, this is not my biased opinion. This is not, you know, I've been going into prisons, like I said, 30 years. And anybody who's been going in with an open heart, open eyes, will tell you that there are incredible individuals that we have sentenced to die in prison that did similar a journey that you had, right? That at some point, and most of them without any hope of ever getting out, at some point they said, I'm gonna transform my life and go through that. So now that people like you are coming out, Sam, right? And then you're a prime example. You're running ARC now. You know, you're running ARC. So you're utilizing your gifts, and the platform has been set for you to continue to show the world that, look at me, I'm one that you were willing to throw away for life. You know, and look at now the ripple effect that your life has on people. How many thousands and thousands of people are you helping now inside and outside of prison, right? Because we were able to maximize and create spaces for you to utilize your gifts. And that's what we want to do in the area of healing. We're proposing that LA County create these brave spaces where people can come and share their stories of generational trauma because of the racist system, and that the people running these circles at the center of these work are folks like yourself that have unique gifts, that have unique credibility, that have a unique ability to connect with other people in pain. And there's many parts of it. There's many parts to this community healing model, but I think that connects all of the pieces, and all of the nonprofits can get involved. We're looking to identify more wounded healers like you, Sam. And next week, we're doing a presentation for about 70 to 100 LA County and LA City officials, where we're going to be presenting this community healing model to LA.
That is what I actually want. If each of you could give me the answer to this next question, as we're pressed for time, but I wanted to just ask, if you could imagine a justice system that puts survivors and healing from harm at the center of the process, the very center of the process, otherwise known as restorative justice, what would that look like for survivors, those and those that are incarcerated? Real quickly, what would that look like for you? Maggie and Itzel first, and then Javier. So imagine you know how our prison system works now. It's punitive, it's punishment. We're getting to where we need to be at, but what if we had a justice system, this entire country, that was based on restorative justice for people that have lost loved ones, survivors of violent crime, but also for the people that are currently in custody? What would that look like?
Okay. So I think it would vary, because right now, supposedly our justice system is set up so that when a crime is committed, they incarcerate the offender right away. And that's it. Everything's fine now. The community is healed, and the survivors are healed because they're in jail. So they're not gonna bother you no more. But that shouldn't be the case. So with a restorative justice approach at rebuilding a justice system, it'd be more solving why it happened. So like Javier mentioned, all these people most of them, that offenders that go to prison, is because they have past trauma. So we have to revisit that. We have to realize what was it that led them to this. I always like to say offenders are survivors who just never got the help. So we have to acknowledge that. And not only that, but in order to successfully help survivors, we have to know what their needs are. And it shouldn't just be like, oh, what do you want their punishment to be? It should be more of asking what they need to cope with it. So I do acknowledge that some survivors would like their offenders to, I'd like a letter, or I'd like to see their change, or I'd like to see their progress. It varies depending the survivor. But I feel like there should be more communication between the survivor and the offender, not directly, but what their needs actually are and not their wants. Because a survivor that is very angry and very resentful might want their offender to just spend the rest of their life in prison. That's not specifically what they need. So I feel like focusing on their healing journey will help show what they need. And that way find a better justice for the crime.
Powerful, wise words. Like that was just wisdom. You actually answered a question that was in our chat box, and I just want to read it to you. Language is powerful to transform suffering. The choice to forgive is powerful. Have you seen a difference with survivors that know the offender rather than the person that they do not know at all? So that was one. And then the other one was, should not some people who've committed violent crimes also be considered survivors as they survive? And you touched on that so eloquently. This should be a 2-hour sit down. I have a few more things that we need to cover, and we're at the last comments time. this is just not enough time to have three such powerful and amazing people to interview. I'd like for each of you, last thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience that you want them to go away with, to take to heart, for each of you, please. Maggie, you want to go first?
Just a comment. I feel like we've mentioned, everyone, like Itzel said, every survivor, whether it was an offender or a victim, you know, you should be open to a healing process, but, you know, like, just because you're not there yet doesn't mean you're not going to get there. Sometimes it's hard to go through a healing process. And I think I know myself. I was depressed for 2 years. I feel like that just should show that, you know, you can get out of there and you can move on. To just hold on tight and keep just taking a step at a time. And it may be painful, it may be hard right now, but, you know, we can heal together.
Thank you. Itzel, last thoughts for our audience?
So I just want to revisit the comment Javier had made earlier. So for any survivors of crime out there, and not only that, but like the offenders who once were survivors, I want to just like remind you that healing journeys are all different. So we're not asking you to come in already like, oh, we're gonna heal you, you're gonna forgive, you're gonna be all better now. It's just inviting you to visit the hardest parts in your life, and it's gonna be hard. It's a lot of trauma, it's a lot of work, but it's so worth it. And that's coming from two people that went through that trauma and went through that work and went through the many tears, having to retell our story countless times. It's gonna be worth it and it's gonna be better. Just because we didn't forget our sister, we're just honoring her even more.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Javier, last thoughts for our audience?
I'll just mention that if people do want to experience more about this work, that you can look up the CNN, the Redemption Project. Two of my colleagues from Healing Dialogue in Action, Jason Clark and Christian Branscombe, did victim offender dialogues that were recorded for Van Jones' show. So look up CNN, the Redemption Project, and then just thank Itzel and Magali. Your whole family has really been an example of just amazing compassion, empathy, love, and strength, and I thank you for that.
Thank you, Javier. And if you want to reach out to our audience, if you want to reach out to Healing Dialogues in Action, listen to the podcast of Itzel and Maggie, please pay attention to the screen or reach out to us at ARC. We'll give you that information. There's the information for Healing Dialogues in Action and ARC, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. Please follow on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, connect, lift the voices of survivors of violent crimes. For me, I think it's important for our communities. My last thoughts are for our communities to be able to heal. We need to lift programs like this that are restorative for all of our communities, for the people that committed the offenses and for the people who've lost loved ones, for the survivors, in order for us to have better, safer communities. In our chat box, we had a few people that were asking for a part 2 of this type of dialogue. Surprise, next week there will be a part 2. Next week we will be hosting a restorative justice with Cheryl Ward Kaiser, an inspirational survivor impact speaker. Google Cheryl Ward Kaiser. She's been around for some time. She actually facilitated, and she was the person who I was in the Victims Offenders Education group with. Powerful lady. I believe she's a 3-time cancer survivor, one of my personal heroes. We'll be here next week with her from 11 to 12 on ARC's Fireside Chat. Again, I want to thank Itzel, Maggie, and Javier for joining, and thank you to our audience. Info for the podcast. Could you put the podcast up, What about the podcast is at the very bottom podcast for our viewers who just asked about that? At the very bottom, A Journey to Healing. That's the name of the podcast. It's A Journey to Healing. Please listen to that podcast. It's a way of healing. It's a way of being able to share and understand the experiences of both Maggie and Itzel and their amazing family. Again, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. Please, everyone, stay well, be safe. God bless, and see you next week.
Love you, Sam.
I love you, brother.